somebody who's been self-employed full-time for the last 10 years. I'm an artist and entrepreneur. I'm really asking, like, can I find a way to make my art and my creativity buy me a house? I think I'm someone uniquely positioned to talk about this because I actually have bought a house before. Hi, my name is Ari. I'm a 33-year-old entrepreneur. I'm here in my Oakland, California apartment. I've lived here for actually the last 11 years. And so I'm starting this series because as someone who's self-employed, often it can be really hard to think about or put into action some of the things that give you financial stability, like having a retirement, like buying a home. And so this series, I'm really asking, like, can I find a way to make my art and my creativity buy me a house? And I think it's an important question. It's something that, when I started my entrepreneurial journey, I didn't know anything about, and I don't think I really had anyone that I could ask about the personal finance side. You can find a lot of information about starting like a business, doing that formation stuff, even like growth strategies. But when it comes to how your business interlocks with your personal finances and your personal well-being, there's really a pretty big gap, I think, in the information that's out there. And so, with this being a new year, my goal this year, hopefully, maybe next year, is to be in a position to buy a house. So I'm somebody who's been self-employed full-time for the last 10 years. I'm an artist and entrepreneur. I run a design studio called Viscera Studio. I've been doing that for roughly the last like 3 or 4 years. Before that, I ran a boutique called Viscera, and somewhere in between those two things, I started my art career as a muralist. So I am somebody who's really made my living, like the majority of my professional life, off of creative pursuits. And I didn't go into being an artist or doing something creative for my education because I thought that that was something that was unstable. This is a important question because we're often told that we either have to trade off stability or pursuing our passion, right? Like there's so much out there about being a starving artist and thinking about these people who have like unicorn businesses. They ate ramen all day, they lived in a basement, like they really suffered. And I don't think that those two things have to go together. I mean, I think entrepreneurship is really hard and a lot of businesses do fail. That's just the reality. But I don't think that that has to mean that you're eternally struggling and you die poor, right? Like, I don't think that those two things have to go together. I do want to talk about and share some of the realities of the financial aspect of being a full-time creative. And I'm sharing this just to change, hopefully, the perspective is like, with my art, I've always been told that that's something that could not be very viable. Like it's a really risky job or risky profession. Like there's no stability. You're going to be a starving artist. But the most that I've made, from in terms of like the amount of work to how much money I've made, has come from art projects, right? Like I've done a commission that was 5 figures for a tech company, and that I made in a week. That would have taken me, like a month and a half with my business, right? But I did want to just share this journey with people because I think it's something that a lot of entrepreneurs don't talk about, maybe in like smaller rooms. When I talk to my friends who are also entrepreneurs, the things that we worry about are being able to retire. We are worried about financial security. We are worried about like the cost of living in places like Oakland or other cities that are really expensive. And I think I'm someone uniquely positioned to talk about this because I actually have bought a house before. It's how I started my first business. So this was, 11 years ago. This was 2011. I actually was still working as a project manager for the government. I had gotten this job the year before I graduated undergrad. I studied architecture, which I'll come back to because it's kind of pertinent to my house searching story. But I bought a short sale house using an FHA loan. And this is going to be a series, so let me know if you want to know more about things like FHA loans versus conventional. I'm not, a financial expert in any way, but I can tell you what my journey was like. But all to say, this was 2011. It was not too long after the 2008 financial crash. I will also say, like, I graduated in 2011, so it was a really terrible economy. But I was lucky to have this project manager job for the government because it basically gave me the stability to have a job where I would get a pay increase every year that I stayed there. It was essentially um, an initiative that they had to try to get more young people into the government. And so, I looked at how much I was paying in rent. At that time, I was really trying to figure out, like, how do I make more money? Like, how do I pay off student loan debt? Before anyone comes for me and says that, like, I'm a Nepo baby, I am not. I grew up with a single mom who's a nurse in affordable housing in Hawaii. So, I've had to put myself through school. I bought that house by myself. About how much rent I pay every month, and it makes me a little bit sick because all of that really could have gone into a mortgage, and not just more income, but potentially changing a financial position is homeownership. Like, that's the way that a lot of people have been able to really grow intergenerational wealth. And so I did a lot of research. I found what FHA loans are, which are basically, in short, federally insured loans, which allow you to, one, have a lower credit score, which I didn't need because I had good credit. But two, you can put a lot less down. With a conventional loan, typically you're putting something like 20% down on a mortgage, which, the average cost in the Bay Area is like close to $1 million. So, who has $200,000 just sitting around? But with an FHA loan, you can put down as little as 3.5%, which was a lot more doable for me at the time. And I was buying a short sale house. So a short sale house is kind of the stage between buying a house on the market and when it goes into foreclosure. So this is basically where the bank knows that this property is, the mortgage is probably not going to get paid back, but it's still owner occupied typically. So it's not going to be what you see in terms of like totally wrecked foreclosed houses that have like all the copper ripped out. This is just their way of kind of like negotiating what they know will be a bad debt. So again, I can talk more about this because like home ownership and buying and all of this can be really complicated. But in short, I was able to negotiate with Bank of America to get a single family house with an FHA loan, which meant that I didn't have to come up with as much cash. But I was saving some money because my mortgage was less than what I was paying for rent. So all of that to say, I have bought a house before. I lived in that house. I put improvements in, and I made some money off of it a few years later. That's actually how I started my first business. I don't know that I would have been able to have the cash. Oh, and sorry, this is my dog Charlie that you see in the background. He's my 13-year-old rescue pit bull. But I don't know that I would have had the cash to be able to start my business without having bought a house and having, just that nest egg that I could invest. Obviously I've been at this for a decade now. So in retrospect, maybe I would have put less of my savings into my business. Now I know that there are more creative ways to be able to start and grow a business without a lot of cash up front. My first business, I basically threw all of that money into the business because it was a product business. I had a physical storefront, so that's a lot of expense to build out. It's a lot of expense to maintain. It's staffing, all these other things. My second business is a service business, so that you can actually start with, if you have a skill set that you can offer, you can start with pretty little cash. Again, I can talk more about these things, but the goal of this video series is really just like, how can I buy a house as somebody who is self-employed, and sharing the process with y'all. So I have done some very preliminary plans. It's not, I will share my full process, but I'm hoping that I can make this happen this year. I've done some basic calculations of what my rent today would look like in a mortgage, how much I would need down if I had an FHA loan versus a conventional loan, which means, how much cash do I need to have on hand? And then I've just done, again, some like basic math to figure out how much I need to make every month to be able to have that down payment. Because, once I have that down payment and I can find a place, what I would normally be throwing into rent, I would just throw into my mortgage, right? So that's one of those things that I feel like by taking this one step and kind of shifting my money into a mortgage instead of rent, I could really make a big difference in my financial security and stability as an entrepreneur. And I recognize that I'm still like young. I'm 33, and I've been at this for 10 years. So I started when I was 23. But I don't think I'm financially in the place that I would have been if I had just stayed in a 9 to 5 job. I did have like a really cushy, stable job as a project manager. It paid me well. It was in line with like what I had studied. Um, but with having a 9 to 5 job, you're neither not always getting to pursue um, the things that you're passionate about or you enjoy. There's obviously like a limit on how much you can make, right? Like if you think about them as like a chart, the amount that I probably make as an entrepreneur is like pretty flat, but there's a lot more that I could make. Whereas like having a 9 to 5 job, it's probably a little bit more of a steady incline, but it kind of maxes out at some point. Post this roughly weekly. I think the next one will be, basically how to do these calculations on how much I need to save. I've also done a little bit of planning around like how I can make that extra income. I'm also going to share some of the strategies that I'm using in terms of like how to make this extra money. As I mentioned, I'm an artist and an entrepreneur. So that means that there are a lot of ways that I can make money. But what's hard is like keeping all of those things spinning while I'm still running a design studio and having my art practice. If you have any like specific things that you want to know about, let me know because I'll make more content about that. But I'm hoping that this is helpful to other people who are interested in entrepreneurship, who are interested in being able to buy a house, who want to just know more about the financial aspect of how that ties into being an entrepreneur from somebody who, has made a lot of mistakes, but has been in it for a while. So if you're interested in following this journey, please subscribe, like this so it comes up on your feed, share this with somebody, and I'll see you in the next one.